Ram, the principal of the college, faculty members, former principals, former students, and the students of today, media, to all of you all, my greetings and good wishes. I feel very privileged to be here today to talk to you all. As was mentioned, founded in 1926, Sri Ram College is closer to celebrating its centenary year. And you have a fourth generation member of the family who founded this institution, and it must be very fulfilling as a member of that family to be here in such a well-rated college in front of the students who are currently earning their spurs from this place, and also in front of several faculty members, and to recall also the list of alumni, which is, I'm sure, the envy of many other colleges in Delhi University itself. I personally have had the benefit, I was telling Mr. Ajay Sriram, that in my personal staff, since I became a minister, I have had three young men, all of them men unfortunately, no girl at all, who have been in my personal staff and who have done remarkably well, and have also moved on to other areas, now one of whom was in administrative service, another who's gotten into politics, a third I'll wait to see where he'll go now, but all three have contributed very well in my personal staff. Of course, names of the alumni, as I said, is a list of envy for other colleges, one of whom I take this opportunity to recall is my mentor, was my mentor, Shri Arun Jaitley, a phenomenal personality, and he felt for this college. He felt for the well-being of this college, and it was there in him every minute. The moment, he loved two things, if I may conclude, or three things. He loved food, he loved Sri Ram College, he loved cricket. So, those of us who have had the luck and opportunity to work with him closely have heard him fondly talk of all the three most often. He would talk of politics only after all this. So, it's a wonderful way in which a college can spread the message of goodwill, spread about its strength, and I think you've had a fair share of alumni who are doing that for you. So I'm glad to hear of the rating, the NAC rating, A+, and also being the topmost college of commerce in the country. You probably are setting also the trend for commerce education in this country. There are very many commerce colleges in the south who send their students over here for their courses in Delhi University, but all of whom aspire to be probably another Sri Ram College somewhere else. So that is the impact you're having. And what it does is actually nowadays not just give the degree that you earn so very well, but also gives you the perspective to become a young entrepreneur yourself, especially in areas like fintech. There is a lot of interest from students coming out of commerce background, or people who want to set up their own business, know the ropes by being in an institution like Sri Ram College, which gives them that exposure to not just being a good student, but also what it makes to go out there in the outside world and not just survive, but be able to carry forward with confidence. So I commend your efforts in that direction, and therefore being in Delhi and being a trend-setting college should be really one of those proudest moments for any student who graduates from this college. But before I go into talking about a few things related to our economy, I was just so energized and touched by that wonderful music, the team which sang the first song. I was very touched. I understand that's the college's song, and that team of students who've done it have really charged us all up, energized us for the day. And I appreciate them for the professional excellence that they are striving to achieve. It shows already in the way they sang that particular song. Quite a few things have been said about Indian economy. We are set to become the third largest. From the 10th position in 2013-14, we've moved over to 5th largest. And about the way in which this economy has been steered in the last 10 years and so on. But in the course of narrating how steps have been taken under the guidance of Honorable Prime Minister, I want to sort of weave it into a kind of narrative which, as students, you would certainly want to put that perspective before you when you talk about the Indian economy today or any other future times when you are talking of economies of the world and economy India in this context. I'll begin where I mentioned that India will in the next few years move to become the third largest. And there are already lots of people say, oh, that's a given. We will at any cost be the third largest. It's all right, you don't need to take any credit for it. It's not the current government which is keen on taking credit for it. It's actually the people of India who should feel that they should get the credit and feel proud about it. It is the people of India who moved it from 10th to 5th and from 5th to the 3rd. To say that it can be a fait accompli and therefore there's no effort as though of the people of India is to undermine the importance of the entrepreneurs of India, the farmers of India, and actually the struggling, low and economically weaker sections of India, because against so many different odds, they are coming out and actually wanting to aspire for better. And it is their efforts which are really pushing us upwards. So there's no way in which I will accept if anyone says, oh, it's guaranteed that we'll move from 5 to 3 in the next few years, and you don't need a prime minister to say, I'll make sure that this country will move to the 3rd rank. I think that is losing perspective of what it takes to move upwards and move for better prospects of our Indian citizens. And I'll further that a bit more. You as students of economics will know that most often when we are talking about an explanation, a narrative, we normally take on board ceteris paribus. We always say, if other things remain constant, this is what will happen. Other things remaining constant, this is how price will play up. Other things remaining constant, this is how supply and demand will work in the market forces, in that market area where market forces determine the equilibrium, right? But look at what has happened in the last 7-8 years. And this is not for the first time, and even earlier you can go looking at how markets have played up or how macroeconomic forces have played up, and therefore economic theory can assume ceteris paribus. But in the given world order, it's not possible at all to assume ceteris paribus. And I will just put before you as to where we are today and where we were a few years ago, and similar situation in a totally less pressured environment 10 years ago. Today's situation, just look at it. Volatility completely in world food supply, food grain supply. Total volatility. Total volatility again in fertilizers. Again in fuel, petroleum, crude, diesel, everything. And also the kind of disruptions you're having in the global value chain. As a result, supply disruptions. Further, if you just look at the way in which the war is festering, there was a time in February 2022, people thought not beyond 6 months. But it's going on. And the aggravation of the situation where you don't know whether the food grains will pass through the Black Sea. And the other countries which have potential to have more food grains grown so that they can supply to those countries which desperately need it are suffering because they don't get fertilizers. So there cannot be a more volatile macroeconomic situation globally. I'm not talking about just India. I'm talking about globally. And if that's the situation, what is guaranteed, pray? What is actually guaranteed? And there was a time when India probably was somewhere in 10th position, but it fell back. So going upwards is not a guarantee, but maybe going downwards, high risk. So for anybody who indicates that, it is a given that India will, from 5th place to 3rd, will move, I'm not sure they're doing a fair comment. But what will bring in that kind of a, let us say, guarantee, if at all you want to say what will guarantee us moving from the 5th to the 3rd? I would say political stability, policy consistency. One government to another or one tenure to another, you have a flip-flop, it affects your economic performance. Your macroeconomic stability will certainly be hindered. And as a representative of CII, I'm sure Ajay Sriram will be able to speak about it, because industry's concern has always been, give us stability, give us policy consistency. Otherwise, there cannot be economic activity which can be consistently growing upwards. You will only be firefighting if the government policy is continuously being up and down or seesaw-like, unpredictable. So you need political stability, you need continuity, you need decisive political decision making. If decisiveness is not there and you're compromising because, let us say, of coalition in politics, or compromising because you have other interests, or compromising because you're thinking that in this region, if this happens, that region I cannot cater, and therefore making India appear as though some regions are blessed and some others aren't. You spoke very evocatively about income disparity. Some areas having per capita income which is reasonable, and some others having pathetically low numbers. These are only purely resultant from very distorted and lack of vision kind of a decision making. And I don't want to name any one region of India, but some regions in this country constantly are trapped with vested interest decision making. And as a result, you can, without me telling you where that low income prevails and where that high income prevails, can be explained out. So you need governments which are going to be able to look futuristically, be ready for reforms, be sure that they have to provide consistency for business to grow. And that's exactly what makes the difference between the kind of decision making that we have taken and the kind of decision making which did not happen some time ago, pulling the country backwards. So I want this fact to be laid before you. And also when we talk of some theories, which are sometimes hallowed, sometimes very actually useful, there is a misunderstanding that if you follow that course, you're going to be better off, and not any other course, arguments be thrown at decision makers. No one theory without the context in which it's being used, can be effective. No one particular decision-making process being effective somewhere can be effective here also. We have to contextualize each of our decision-making, and without that, you will never be able to achieve the desired results. The reason why I'm spending a few minutes elaborating on this is during COVID, about which both your founder chairman's presence in the Ajay Sriram and also your principal commented. We were very much advised during COVID, print or borrow or do anything but spend money, give everybody money in their hands. I just want to highlight, yes, managing aggregate demand or to prevent economic recession, some solutions have been given in the post-World War kind of situations. Even today, many of the Western economies follow that principle because their economic parameters probably can accommodate that. But accommodating that in the Indian context, I'm not rejecting it totally, in the Indian context will have to be tailored to our requirements. And therefore, when people talk about Manrega, for instance, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantees Scheme, I would want to highlight how during the COVID, two things which were ensured. It was mentioned that one of the things that I had said was no Indian will go hungry during the COVID. But we ensured that for those who were returning back to their villages, remember the story of the migrant workers, the dimensions which got elaborated in the media, and I'm not blaming them. It's their duty to highlight where there is distress, they are doing that. But there are times when I wish that they highlight also how those distressed migrants were also taken care of. I'm not asking people to praise the government. I'm also asking for putting forward the data which is important. I just want to draw your attention to it. On the feeding the poor, ensuring that nobody goes hungry, we had come up with the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, through which you had about 80 crore people being given free food grains. And if the families were in the village and the worker himself was elsewhere, we adopted the technology and made sure that he could draw something out of it, and the rest could be drawn by the family which is back in the village. But even with all that said, when the migrants' reverse flow happened, when migrants started going homewards, quickly we ramped up 2 or 3 things. One, we ensured in those districts where migrant laborers were going in significant numbers. They were about 117, I think, 116 or 17 districts in this country. They are districts in states like Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan, Bihar and UP, Jharkhand and Orissa. Large number of workers went back to their respective villages. And if I name the states, it's not as if all districts in those states had these inflow of workers. In these 117 districts, we made sure 15 ministries' programs were converged. 50,000 rupees were given, 50,000 crores of rupees were given for giving employment for 125 days between June and October of year 2020, the corona year. The per day wage of the worker, which was at that time something like 182 per day rupees, was increased to 202, and we made sure for 125 days, which ended in October, they were all given work in their respective village. Nobody was denied. And this is by converging 15 ministries, all of whose activities had to happen in the rural areas. They all did it during that course. And this 50,000 was to make sure that those departments were able to get going with their work. But Manrega per se, that year in the budget, BE level, we had given about 60,000 crores. But during that period, those 6 months I'm talking about, people were made to take up the jobs, enroll, and everybody could go and enroll. There was no procedural difficulty. The budget was increased from 60,000 to over 1 lakh of rupees for those months between June and October. 125, did I say 6 months? 4 months. They were given the wage, and the Manrega budget was increased to over 1 lakh crores. So food and Rozgar, Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Rozgar Yojana had this element of 15 ministries converging, 116 districts being attended to, which were mapped for the return of laborers. And in this, 27 aspirational districts were also given. You know what the aspirational districts are. They were actually districts which were lagging behind. We didn't call them backward districts. We called them aspirational districts. Even there, the money was spent to make sure those who were returning would be given adequate care. And of course, post that, we didn't forget them. The e-Shram portal which was created to make sure the nature of work or skills that they had was recorded so that they can be upskilled, training can be given, post that they can choose to go where they want to go. The e-Shram portal is a very classic case, and I wish to say that here, of how we allowed it as an open-ended, you could define the job you could do, or you're trained in, or you worked by default, and on that for your upskilling, if you need upskilling, we would do it. Normal labor department definitions of job or skill would probably confine itself to traditional definitions. Since we kept it open, 400 types of jobs got recorded in that platform. Because people chose to say, I'm this, I want to do this, I've been working on this, give me skilling. We kept it open and flexible. And those who went on to the portal to record, I think it runs in some crores, 40 crores, I think, of people who have recorded themselves. Sorry, 29 crores as of June, 50% are women, and these are informal jobs. 50% said, look, I want to be recorded and my skills need to be upgraded, and therefore, and in that 50% are women. So the e-Shram portal broke down those traditional barriers of only these jobs and broke down the barrier that informal workers are mostly men. It has opened up avenues for women who want to remain in the informal sector but yet take care of themselves in terms of doing some meaningful work. And one other step during the COVID, on Rozgar, taking care of workers, over 7,000 crores, 7,200 odd crores were spent in helping those migrant laborers who got caught in major project schemes that are going on in different remote parts of the country. Migrant laborers, those who were within the range of the city or a railway station, even they suffered, but they started walking back. Some took trains, some took buses. But those who were locked up in faraway regions where, it could be a hydroelectric power station being built, or a thermal unit being built, or a construction site, such workers with their family and children who were staying there have been given money there and then, wherever they were. 7,000 odd crores were spent on just that during COVID. So when I say people told me to print and borrow and spend, I did not print. I did borrow and made sure that targeted approach was taken to give people who may be left without any help, and therefore it took care of people who were struggling. But however, today those very people who asked me to borrow, who asked me to print, are asking me questions about, hey, will you be able to manage the current account deficit and also the fiscal deficit? Are you okay? Will you do it? And the very same people ask me about, what is the debt to GDP today? Look at the number, as though the world was all calm and we didn't have to borrow, everything was fine. So that very same set of people, when they ask this question to me, I look at the sheer audacity. Sheer audacity. You want this country to come up? You want a responsible government? You want a government which takes care of those poor and needy? Or is it one then and another today? So that is where I want to highlight the fact. Policy stability, consistency doesn't often go by the theory that we study in our colleges and schools. Post that, it is our readiness to adopt those policies. After all, what is your Manrega? People will now say, oh, that's all Keynesian economics. Yes, it's Keynesian. But where would you want to use it? You would want to apply your mind and use it. Use it when it is so required. And not blindly throw money at it because you want to skill those workers and move them on to better jobs. The philosophy of Prime Minister Modi, not just as Prime Minister, but as Chief Minister as well when he was in Gujarat, is not to go on the principle of entitlement. He strongly believed there and strongly believes today as Prime Minister that you have to empower people, give them the choice of what they want to do. Spend on those fundamental requirements which give them the power to decide where they want to be, give them access to resources, give them access to such facilities with which they can. That's why you look at, good housing being given to them, roads being built to the last mile connectivity, water so that women don't spend hours to get, miles away, water to bring back for drinking. You don't look at, toilets as being, all right, it's okay, they'll build it for themselves because it has a bearing on health. World Health Organization gave a report to say while Swachhata Abhiyan and also providing toilets at home have been going on, it has had immediately within that year an impact on women's health, children's health. What better can be done when you ensure the health of the current generation so that your future is ensured? So that is the difference between looking at empowerment as opposed to looking at entitlements. COVID time again, we took over also the challenge of meeting up with a lot of requirements on reforms. Many steps were taken during that time. Announcements on the pipeline, national infrastructure pipeline, national monetization pipeline, and also looking at Atmanirbhar Bharat. Today, this morning's newspaper carried the news of a third or the fourth list of negative items under defense, so that you don't import those goods which are being produced world-class within the country. Those private manufacturers who are producing these equipments are finding it easy to sell outside, export it, but our own armed forces will have to be empowered to buy them. So continuously our attempt is to make sure that those goods which are being produced in India, particularly produced by the MSMEs, will be given support by Government of India. Today, both the new industries and the old ones, the traditional ones as opposed to the today's startup innovation-driven ones, are all doing well. Foreign exchange reserves are touching new highs. If the policy was not friendly, you're not going to have foreign exchange coming in, with the global market situation being what it is, investment situation being what it is. Investments are happening in India. This is where I want to bring in an element of compare and contrast. Between April 2000 and March 2023, 23-year period, the total FDI inflows into this country is 919 billion US dollars. But if you were to look at what came in only in the last 9 years, that is between 2014 and 23, it is $595.25 billion. That is, from the total which came in the 23 years, 65% of it came only in the last 9 years. What does that reflect? It reflects a policy. It reflects a policy, it reflects a policy continuity, and it reflects a macroeconomic environment which favors investments, and therefore when people from outside think, that's a place to go, that's where I need to invest, they come without hesitation. I just would do the comparison now. India in 2008 grappled with the banking crisis, you know it. And that situation was largely confined only to the banking sector, if anything, somewhat on the exports as well. That's nothing compared to what we've seen, not just India, I'm not taking credit for it. That's nothing in comparison what you've seen during COVID. Globally, every country was affected. Nobody could have helped you, nor could you have helped anybody except in sharing vaccines. If during that time, because we didn't have a perspective of how India's macroeconomic compulsions matter, we couldn't come out of that. We had double-digit inflation, low growth, twin balance sheet problem. You're aware, right? What twin balance sheet problem is? The Indian economy's balance sheet and the balance sheet of large companies. All of them suffered because of bad policies. Ended up in policy paralysis. And again, I want to compare and contrast, especially those who think that we'll automatically go to rank 3 from rank 5. What was our category at that time? Fragile 5. 5 worst affected economies, fragile economies. We were one of them. So what is guaranteed is what I want to ask. Without policy consistency, without policy being thoughtfully laid out, nothing is guaranteed in your economy. So even during COVID, even as you're taking care of migrant workers, even as you're taking care of poor, not to be hungry, even as you're taking care of putting money in the hands of people who are staying in confined, far-off areas like construction workers, even as you're taking care of the migrants who are going back to their villages, you're making sure that the economy doesn't suffer. You've given program and packages like the Emergency Credit Guarantee Liquidity Scheme, which we gave to the MSMEs, with government guaranteeing the first loss. MSMEs, which is a State Bank of India study, shows very clearly MSMEs many of them did not have to remove even one worker. They kept paying them low business, but their nose was above water. They didn't sink. Again, a policy measure which was of benefit for the MSMEs. Again, talking to students who are studying commerce and economy, I spoke about how some theories will have to be adapted to suit your needs. Whether it's the Keynesian, or whether it's the question of borrowing to keep your economy going. I also talk about the nudge theory. I'm sure many of you are doing it, the Richard Thaler nudge theory, the economist who got the Nobel Prize in 2017. It is because of nudge that people who were receiving subsidy for buying LPG cylinders, even those who belong to salaried tax-paying class, people readily came forward on the call of the Prime Minister saying, I don't need the LPG cylinder which has a subsidy, give it to somebody deserving. People gave up. Nudge theory being used by Honorable Prime Minister to make a difference to the economy. Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. Today your gender ratio, the sex ratio in many of the states which was adversely affecting women, have all gone up because nudge. Nudge is also giving the gentle push for subsidized loans for women, making sure that they don't have to borrow from their brothers or sisters or mothers or fathers or their husband. They can do their business without having to give collateral. These are gently nudging women to say, come, I will give you the guarantee in the loan, do your business. And if you pay well, you get more. Similarly, the Swanidhi scheme, which is also lending through the banks, nudge theory. You are a small roadside vendor, a push cart vendor, as you say in Hindi, my pronunciation is pathetic, Redi Patri Wale. You give them loan without asking them to provide a collateral. Otherwise, they were getting ripped off by middlemen who gave them very high interest. I don't know how many of you all come from tier 2 or tier 3 or rural areas. A vegetable vendor who needs, let us say, 100 rupees to today do his business, goes to a middleman, he gives him 90 rupees, keeps the 10 back, and in the evening after the business, when he comes to pay back, he'll still have to pay 100 rupees. That is how middlemen lending works. For such people who depended on middlemen, because they couldn't give collateral to a bank, they couldn't even enter a bank, Prime Minister Modi's schemes through the Jan Dhan Yojana, where zero deposit accounts were opened. Today, those people receive PM Swanidhi. And if they pay properly in time, greater amounts are given to them. The very same principle which is today going to help the Vishwakarma. That's not a caste grouping. Anybody who does any skilled work using their hands or tools, and the nearly 13, 14 or 18 categories have been mentioned specifically. All of them are going to get loans. They're going to be skilled. Per day skilling, they're going to get a stipend of 500 rupees. Post that, they're going to get a 15,000 rupees worth of tool kit for themselves. These are part of the nudging methodology, the nudge of Richard Thaler. And that's used as a tool to promote better economic activity tailored to India's requirement. So that's what I want you all to appreciate. And the last of the theories on which I certainly want to say, look at it being applied in India, the Laffer curve. You know about it. The curve, as it goes about taxation, tells you higher rate, at the same time better compliance, is what is discussed when you're talking of Laffer curve. That's exactly what Prime Minister Modi has done. No increase in tax, whether it is COVID time or otherwise. In the last 9 years, tell me any item on which, if anything, we've rationalized taxes, we've not increased it. And therefore the returns, as you were talking, Mr. Ajay Sriram, the collection in GST, the collection in direct taxation, all of them are reaching higher levels because of better compliance, thanks to the citizens, better compliance because of the way in which we are using technology, stopping of evasion because we are using technology, but not because we have increased the tax at all. Laffer curve. So the way in which we have moved in the last few years, particularly the very challenging years, is to have a leadership which thinks clearly, with grit, doesn't shy away from reforms. The taxation collection are all showing it. And even today, when JP Morgan has introduced India into its list, it shows in the global emerging market bond index, it shows a prospect for $23 billion to come to India. That is the kind of impact that inclusion into the JP Morgan bond index means. I won't take more of your time, just a thought on how the G20 presidency has been used effectively by India to convey 2 or 3 important messages. That India thinks for the globe, India voices the concerns of the global south, and the very fact that India's motto or the slogan for G20 was Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, we understand it, but for the sake of everybody else, it was translated to say one earth, one family, and one future, which speaks about inclusivity. One family, all of us. So, African Union entering into the G20 as a permanent member has been facilitated purely because of the guidance and the leadership the Prime Minister showed, not just this year, but for few years now, generally building the consensus to have African Union come into the G20. It's not a small work, it's a big achievement.
This is Vedant. We'll draw the long-term chart for Vedant in front of you. And first to you, Gaurang. A series of flip-flops. You and I have seen Vedant over the last 25 years. Sometimes they merge